Ready to revolutionize your higher ed marketing game?
Yes.
Well, then don't miss out on Element 451's Engage Summit, June 27 and 28. Explore the cutting edge world of education and AI technology and unleash your creativity like never before. Register today at engage.element451.com and use promo code EdUp50 for $50 off. 3 higher ed authors, 100 plus college and university presidents, dozens of actionable insights for academic leaders. Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, is now available on Amazon. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to ed up on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Salustio back with you here. See, I already messed up. I told my guests I was going to mess up. I can't even say my own name because I do it so much. Apparently, I lose my tongue. As you know, I step up from my desk here at Lindenwood University, where I am discussing what's happening in enrollment or financial aid, and immediately try to podcast and switch my brain in mid-stride here and fail most of the time. But I make my guests and guest co-hosts look very good with my number of mistakes I bring to the microphone. What's really interesting today, for those of you that are reading the news, one of the really interesting things happening right now in higher education is we see in the state of Texas that is removing tenure from their faculty and staff, which is a really interesting development in and around higher education as institutions prepare for the future. If you listen to the EdUp Experience, because everybody always asks me, what does the future of higher education look like? Well, you might have seen that Elvin and I, of course, co-founder Elvin Freitas, we podcasted in the metaverse, in a Victory XR metaverse, where they actually recorded us in our avatars walking around, and we got to narrate what was happening within the metaverse. Lots of cool things, interesting things happening in and around higher education. One of the things that I am most proud of here at EdUp is that we like to bring together guests and guest co-hosts that make for very fun and interesting conversation. What I think you'll find today is how prepared my guest is, because he came on and he said, "Are we actually recording today? Don't you prepare?" And I was like, "Me? Prepare? No, I don't prepare." Another person who's never prepared to be on the microphone, no, he is my guest co-host today. You've seen him he's been on the receiving end of my questions twice, but now he might ask a few questions of his own. He is the one and the only Dr. Frank Dooley, Chancellor of Purdue University Global. Frank, what's happening?
It's happening. It's springtime in Indiana, which is always a great thing. And we had graduation last Saturday, which is even a better thing. So it's always good to see the students make it across the stage, those have been successful. So I'm feeling really, really good. And it is nice to be your sidekick today. And I'll just sit and let you run the show, and let's have some fun with David.
Well, you know what? I always say there's one rookie mistake. There's one rookie mistake that people make when they guest co-host with me the first time. And that is they say the name of the guest before I get to introduce them. But that's okay, Frank. Get the mulligan. We're going to bring him in now. Here he is, Dr. David Mellott. He's the president of Christian Theological Seminary. David, how are you?
I'm great. It's wonderful to be here today, prepared or not.
I was going to say, true or false, you thought we were doing a prep meeting today.
Yes, I did. I thought this was a get to know you. So it is, but more than that.
This is what we say.
Live in the now.
We're just gonna roll. We're gonna roll with it. We always, we have a very broad audience. We always say that there's somebody out there that hasn't heard of the institution from what our guest is representing. So tell us a little bit about Christian Theological Seminary. Where are you? What do you do? How do you do it?
Great. Well, Christian Theological Seminary has its origins in Butler University, which used to be Northwestern Christian University back in 1855. And in 1924, Butler created a school of religion that in 1958 separated from the university and became independent, built its own campus. And so we're right next to Butler. Actually, in 2017, the seminary sold the building and the campus to Butler. So now we are within, we leased back the building that we built, or at least a portion of it, and we are on the south campus of Butler University. So, as people would expect, we offer theological degrees. a master's of theological studies, a master of divinity, a doctor of ministry, and the first in the world PhD in African American preaching and sacred rhetoric.
Amazing.
So we also do offer 2 counseling degrees, one in marriage and family therapy and another in clinical mental health counseling. And we just announced last week that we have created a school of counseling and a school of theology as a way to promote these fantastic degree programs.
All right. Well, that was impressive.
There's a lot there, which is amazing. So congratulations, first of all, for setting up a new program, new colleges to promote the message. As you know, higher ed is in a tumultuous time, as we would say.
Yes.
Religiously affiliated institutions have had their troubles lately, and some have closed, some are seeing enrollment fluctuations. And then you look at what's happening in society and you wonder, and you go, well, maybe they're more important than ever. Maybe we need more of the goodness, as it were, with all the divisiveness that we have. Can you just talk about what it means to you to work with an institution that is religiously focused and grounded, and can institutions that are survive and thrive in the U.S. today?
Well, that's a big question, but I'll do my
There's like
best.
2 or 3 questions. But
Yeah,
just
exactly.
one at a
I mean,
time.
so one of the things that's fantastic, I think, about our seminary is the breadth of educational opportunities that we provide. And so all of those programs, including our counseling center and our Faith in Action project, are all rooted in a common set of values. And of those 5 values, the heartbeat of it is that we believe that every person comes with human dignity from God. That's the centerpiece of everything, that every person deserves to be treated fairly and equitably because they are created in the image of God. They come with God-given human dignity. So that permeates everything we do in terms of whether it's a theological degree or it's a counseling degree. And one of the things that we're really clear about is that we support local Christian community, often manifest in congregations. That's the way it's often talked about. But there's other forms of Christian community that are out there as well, and we support those. And we believe that from our standpoint, that part of Jesus' vision for the world was dependent on people coming together and without exclusion. So this is a centerpiece, again, of our perspective, that Jesus's vision was gathering and scattering people, gathering, scattering, gathering, scattering. And the gathering, everybody was welcome, regardless of who they were. And so that's really what we think is particularly valuable. And it's very valuable right now and important in our country, in a moment in which exclusion and oppression seem to be far too common. And it's hard to find spaces where everybody is welcome. So it doesn't mean that everybody is welcome to do whatever they want and behave any way they want. But if they're willing to be together in community and respect one another, then they're welcome to participate. So in addition to that, I think the message of Jesus was very clear about the importance of the particular person. So in other words, it's not just systems that Jesus was critical of and in conversation with, but Jesus was very concerned about the actual person in front of him. Oftentimes even pushing him to be more present to them and their need. And I think that's another hallmark given our counseling programs, where we train people to be present to a particular person or a family in their moment of need. So that's, there's a lot more I could say, of course. I could talk.
And you will say more, because
I
I'm
will.
asking more questions. I do want to note the, I don't think irony is the word, but purpose, where you talk about gathering and scattering. That is what you're also doing in an institution.
That's right.
For lack of a better way to put it, right? You're gathering people, you're teaching them, they're scattering, they're making society better, their communities better in image, so to speak.
That's right.
And Frank, I'm going to bring you in, but I got to ask you.
Are you in or out?
So you got to get on the mic or not.
I'm in. I'm totally in. David, one question that comes to mind, I studied a little bit of your institution, and it appears to me you're 100% online, or do I have that right?
No, we have a mix of, we're hybrid. So students can take their courses in person or they can take them online. There are some there's one degree that'll be 100% virtually accessible come the fall. Some of our programs are low residency, like the Doctor of Ministry. The master's programs are a mixture of in-person and online. So we're a little bit of both.
I was curious then, though. I mean, has institutions in the curriculum in places like yours, have you evolved because of COVID or devolved or whatever?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, how has COVID affected ministry and the teaching of ministry, the practice of ministry? And then maybe the follow-up question to that is, why have you created two schools, one around theology and one around counseling?
Right. So let me say the first thing about COVID I think COVID, like everybody, I think would say, has accelerated certain things that were in motion already. So we had, before COVID, had been teaching some courses hybrid, or some people call it high flex. There's lots of language out there, but people in the classroom and then people on Zoom at the same time, kind of together in the same space. Synchronous learning with people from across the country. CTS was already doing some of that with another program. And we had some great students, wonderful students that we got to be part of us because of that. So we were already somewhat disposed, and we also had some strong leadership to create a very, I say, robust technological infrastructure. So when COVID came, we actually were able to move to online education, actually just immediately, without much of a problem. Faculty had, of course, to get up to speed a little bit about changing their courses, but we were ready to go. I think what COVID did was it gave the faculty more confidence that every course practically could be taught virtually, and gave us a lot of sustained experience. And the seminary also invested in them. We offered them educational opportunities. We hired an educational technologist to work with them, in addition to the IT team, who are more about infrastructure. So we also have, because of our degree programs, we do have some publics that have certain demands on us. So for instance, the United Methodist Church requires United Methodist students to take their courses in person with us, because we're not a United Methodist school. We're a Christian Church, Disciples of Christ school. So they have to take their classes in person. The counseling programs also have some requirements of in-person learning, as you might expect.
Yep.
So in order to fulfill accreditation requirements. So we're always going to have an element of face-to-face. And again, I think we want to be face-to-face as much as we can, but we also realize online education actually provides us with tremendous opportunities. And we would much prefer people to have some theological education when they're working in the church rather than none, which is what would happen if we completely cut off virtual opportunities. We created something about the two schools. So the main reason we created the two schools was, for decades, CTS has been offering degrees in counseling, and we have been providing counseling sessions through our students since the early 70s, supervised counseling sessions. But the seminary, one, had never claimed counseling as part of its identity. So the other part of that equation is that when somebody's out there in the world and they think, oh, I'd like to be a therapist, the first thing that comes to their mind isn't, oh, I should go to a seminary. So it's like nobody thinks about that. I wouldn't think about that. And there's only a handful of seminaries that have counseling degrees. So the School of Counseling and the School of Theology allows us to have more explicit pathways for students into the programs. So now we can promote the School of Counseling, Christian Theological Seminary, and people can say, oh, I want to go to the School of Counseling. Like that makes more sense to them. And as a matter of fact, I had a student stop me in the hallway, a current student who's I think he's about to graduate. And he said, I want to thank you so much for creating the School of Counseling. You just made my degree more valuable.
Nailed it.
So I think this is, it also creates explicit pathways for donors. So donors who might say, you know what, I'm not really so interested in training clergy. I'm not so interested in theology, but I am interested in counseling. I am interested in getting more qualified counseling clinicians out into the state of Indiana, to the city of Indianapolis, to other parts of the country. I will give to that. So the schools are going to create, I think, a lot more opportunities for relationship and community engagement. So maybe it'll hopefully get some more revenue in terms of grants too for the counseling programs.
Talk about marketing for a minute, because you're kind of hitting on it.
Yeah.
Student pipelines are important when you're running an institution. Let's just get real for a minute. You got to have
right.
students, you have to operate, and you have to create interest. Was there a marketing, messaging, crystallization part of this to say, hey, look, we could market by program. We could say we have a counseling program, but when you have a school, that could have multiple programs within it. So now I'm marketing in a unit that has multiple programs that can save money. It can get me more interest in this multiple program and pathways versus this one program. I got to go out program by program by program. Was there a strategic intent when it comes to messaging to students for an understanding, for a crystallization?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's the other piece that we've been working on, is that we realized that if we're going to be successful in recruiting students, we can't just put up a shingle that has all our stuff on it and people will figure out where they belong. That we've actually got to create segmented marketing strategies so that we can actually get to people. So when we think about, those counseling students, we have to create a very different kind of marketing plan than, say, trying to get someone to enroll in the theology program or in a doctor of ministry. So what we've done is we're creating segmented marketing strategies, and we're going to launch this summer, actually any day now, a institutional awareness campaign all across the region, so that people can know about our School of Counseling, which is the big surprise. Everybody expects us to offer school, theology degrees, so that's not the news. The news is we're here, having a school of counseling and a counseling center, which we will provide over 10,000 counseling sessions this year alone in our counseling session through our student interns and our residency program. So one thing I'm really proud of is that a freestanding seminary like us, very, very, very few of them ever do an institutional awareness campaign. So I'm pushing, I would like to see us up on billboards, and I'd like to see us in the airport when you're getting your luggage, and and the newspaper and radio and other places. But typically seminaries like us don't do that kind of advertising. But we realize this is the moment. And we also realize it's going to put us in some more direct competition with our peers that offer counseling degrees, which is something that we've never really taken on directly. But we think we have a value proposition that's distinct from, say, getting a counseling degree from another university, especially a secular university. So I think we've got some values that we can add to that educational experience.
That's a fact.
Frank?
Yeah, I was curious, David, can you share who your students are? I mean, are they people who have been ministers for several years and now they're coming back to enrich their abilities and their skills, or are they 22-year-olds got, I would be interested in the profile of your students and what leads them to find you.
That's a good question. We have some students who come to us directly from college, going into our counseling programs and some of our master's programs in theology. A lot more of our students, though, are what I would call a little older, like sort of second career students. Some of them are already pastors and who didn't get a theological degree and now want one. Some of them got a master's degree earlier, and now they want a doctorate, so they're returning to us to get their doctorate. We do have some people who are in their third vocational, movement. So they've done a couple of things in their life, and now they want to do something else. We have also people who work in other fields who know that a theological degree could actually help them do their work better. So a master's in theological studies, which is 37 credits here at CTS, is a perfect degree for a lawyer or a doctor or a nurse or a community organizer who really could see how a theological education and working with communities of faith could be beneficial to them in their work, and having a theological understanding could be really helpful. So they kind of get the sort of basic introduction to theological reflection and theological studies. So it's a pretty wide swath of students in terms of age, in terms of discipline, certainly a wide variety in terms of race and ethnicity. Probably about 60% of our students are women, 40% are men, 40% are people of color, 60% are identify as white or Caucasian.
I also saw a program, is it an African-American preaching and
Sacred rhetoric.
How does that end up at your institution?
Well, it's the vision of a former president and a national treasurer, Dr. Frank Thomas, who worked together to bring this program to CTS.
Wonderful.
And it's the first of its kind. It's the very first degree in preaching that highlights and focuses on African-American preaching and sacred rhetoric as a focus of study, worthy of studying and lifting up to the wider community. And all this is, in support of a vision that Dr. Thomas has for a renaissance of preaching in our country. And I am so proud of this program. We've just accepted our third cohort in January. We take in a cohort every 3 years. And we have people from around the country who are national speakers who are coming to study in this program and receive their PhD. It's a really marvelous, very gifted people. So
don't settle for average marketing strategies. Join us at the Element 451 Engage Summit, June 27 and 28, and discover how to harness the power of AI technology in higher ed marketing. Connect with industry leaders, explore cutting-edge technologies, and future-proof your marketing strategy. Use promo code EdUp50 for $50 off. Register now at engage.element451.com. You know that the world of higher education is experiencing evolutions and revolutions. You want to be part of the progress. Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education with insights from more than 100 college and university presidents, will show you how. Get your copy of Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education now on Amazon right away. We think you're going to love it. It's
Amazing.
That's pretty cool. Anytime you can create some differentiation like that, it matters, right? In higher ed now. One of the things that's happening, you know this, David, and I asked this really in different ways to all the presidents, but there is is there an anti-intellectualism movement perhaps, or a devaluation of the degree as a credential of some kind? And there's a lot of non-credit, there's a lot of certificates. I always joke that that it's a hard space to understand when it comes to stacking. And my cousin Vizzy, I always say my cousin Vinny because I love the movie, offers a real estate course. What does that do for me? Is it get me something? It's just a non-credit credential that somebody offers that I can take And so I see you have non-credit stuff. You have some professional development,
We do.
workforce. What's the word I'm looking for? Continuing education
Right.
classes. Are you seeing a greater interest in those? Is it about the same? Are those students stepping through to degrees, or is it a completely different market? Can you kind of give me an idea of what interest looks like? And are you? That's 3 questions now. Here's the 4th. Are you seeing the overall devaluation of a college degree from your students, or at least a questioning of whether it's worthwhile or not?
Well, well, there are a lot of questions. I think the first, I can say pretty
That's
quickly.
called a shotgun approach to
Yeah,
questions. Just
yeah.
splatter them out and see what sticks, right?
We launched 2 pilot programs last fall in sort of the lifelong learning approach. One is micro-credentialing and skills for flourishing congregations. So it's really practical and responding to what we hear loud and clear from our pastors and alums that they need, and lay people. We need more practical education on how to run a church, how to do the finances, how to take care of facilities, especially these days. This year, we're going to have, next year, we're going to have an entire program around digital ministry in a digital age. So how do you actually educate Christians? How do you do Christian formation? How do you think about worship, which now has become a really regular part of church life? I mean, pastors tell us, I've got one half of the congregation here in the church, and I have the other half online. And they say, how do I take in new members when this person will never, ever come through the door of the physical church? What does that look like? I don't, So Christian ministry is changing. And I have people, pastors to say, I have people from all over the world attending my online service. And how do I integrate it with the church that's locally, that's in the building, or do I have 2 separate churches? How do I manage? What's the technology that I need? So there's lots of things that are happening.
Well, let's start the insanity.
That's right. And we, so the other thing is that we launched our Life in Common series, which was to bring theological reflection to matters that really are important in our life in common. And so last year was around Christianity and capitalism, Christianity and money, to take a closer look at the ways in which Christianity has maybe too closely been aligned with capitalism and the problems with that. Again, next year, we're going to talk about Christianity and the digital age, and we're going to talk about I love this. The one course is going to be called Christian Resurrection and the Metaverse. So what's the relationship between these 2 things? These are designed for kind of adult ed opportunities for pastors and lay people to engage kind of pretty substantial conversations. We know that local churches just don't have the resources to do, they don't have the contacts. We can offer it at a price point that they can, I hope, can afford. And so we've just started that. So I don't know what that's all going to lead to, but I think it's an important part of the work that we're doing to bring a theological reflection, not only to the people of our churches, but I would love to see people who are not in our churches coming to some of these classes, because I think they should be concerned. If you're not Christian, you still should be concerned about how Christians and capitalism work together. So that's my perspective.
I have a follow-up to that. You seem to be one of these incredibly innovative people. And I mean, you talk about, we launched this, we came here, we moved here. So I mean, I see that innovation gene in you. I think sometimes when I see innovators, one of the things they're not very good at is stopping, because now they got too many things on their plate. So do you have the ability, when we roll out all of these things, this is a great thing, we're going to keep this going, indefinitely. This was a nice try, but maybe we put that in the back burner for now. How do you deal with that? Because my hunch is, like most universities, your resources are finite.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I tell my staff, I have another load of ideas that we could do, but I'm holding them back till we, till we really get a sense of whether these things are going to work and what they mean. And what I've tried to do, instead of adding programs, I actually haven't added very much. What I've tried to do is frame things that we already have so that they could become more evident. So the creation of the 2 schools actually has created very little in the way of additional programs at this point. It's just making our current programs more accessible. The two programs I had talked about earlier, the micro-credentialing and our Life in Common series, those are new. But I've spent most of my time helping the faculty redesign the degree programs to make them more accessible, to renovate the counseling building, the counseling center with, new furniture and carpeting and painting. And so it sounds like there's maybe more innovation than there really is, but there is a lot of relationship building and, there's a lot happening. But I think to your point, it's essential for me as the president to know when to hold back and say, okay, we need to keep doing what we're doing now and do it really well, and before we add anything else. And the thing I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this, Frank, but or you, Joe, but when you start innovating and you start adding programs or adding just changing things, then other people who's had ideas for a long time start sharing their ideas. True. And they think, okay, I guess we're now going to do some new things. And so then you have to start saying no to people and say, well, we're not really ready for that. I mean, we've got too much going on right now, or we don't even have the capacity to advertise it. So you can come up with the idea, but the office that's in charge of promoting it is actually at overload right now. Right now I've got so many announcements scheduled to come out in the next 2 months that if I asked them to make one more announcement, they probably would say, we just don't have the space for this. So,
it's might be looking for a new president or something like that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times those announcements too, they're all good things.
Yeah.
That's right.
How do you find another spot for another good thing?
Right,
and
right.
then something waits, and I do to kind of jump into the conversation about innovation. Frank, your question about being an innovator, and David about maybe holding back. I also think it's the mindset. When you give permission to people to innovate because you're an innovator, all these other little things around you start changing for the better. Maybe it's not a new program, but it's a process that changes because somebody goes, well, David's asking this question. He's my president. Maybe I should ask this question and why we're doing it this way. And sometimes it's those efficiencies. Maybe you don't need a new program. You just need to revitalize the messaging you have around an existing program because it still has value. But you don't know that unless people challenge the status quo a little bit sometimes. And isn't it true in higher ed? We can just status quo our way to everything. We really can. How do you keep at the front end, David? How, when it comes to leadership, and this is just general leadership question, how do you operate? What's your leadership philosophy when it comes to your work environment? And what do your people expect of you as a leader?
Well, I mean, I think, the number one thing that the president does in an institution like ours is the one who not only holds the mission, but helps create the vision with the rest of the community. And I think that the big charge and the most challenging charge is to develop that vision in community and not get ahead of the institution. And so, building trust inside the community and all even the outside of the community, the organizations that we partner with is essential. So I think we've sort of changed our culture here to one of, everybody gets to participate in some way. And it doesn't mean that everybody is the decider. So that there's certain things that it's not actually fair for me to give the decision to somebody else. I tell people sometimes, I'm the one that's going to make this decision because I'm the one who is ultimately going to have to be responsible. I don't want to put that on you, but I do want to hear what you think. And I want us to work on this together. If it's only going to work if we work on this together. So one of the things I'm pretty known for here is, I don't have an example, but everything I start with is with a blank sheet of paper or a sketch pad and sort of chicken scratch on it. And I will often, sometimes I'll write it on the whiteboard, but sometimes I will do it on a sheet of paper and pass it around. I tried not to get, again, ahead of people and say, okay, this is what I'm thinking. let's make it better. Let's figure out what's good about this, what's problematic about this. Then I do another round of that. I don't like having a polished handout when we're in that kind of real initial innovation stage, because then people feel like they don't have anything to contribute. Because like, David's got it all figured out. So if I say anything, he's just going to get defensive, and that's not going to be helpful. So
are your faculty all in Indianapolis, or are they spread?
they are. Yeah, we have a residential faculty. Yeah.
So
I
mean, that's
yeah. So
from myself, because my faculty are in all 50 states. And
oh wow, yeah.
so I find one of the you have an advantage that you have people there.
Yes. Yeah.
There's an article in today's New York Times about Robert Rubin and how he liked to think, and he talked very much the same thing. Start with a notepad, and I start writing down what are the options for this kind of a decision.
Yeah.
And he actually has some of his examples of his thinking when he was Secretary of the Treasury and things like that. So you're mirroring a really good thinker. So I like what you're doing. My challenge is I got leaders, even my leadership team is dispersed around the country. And I find there are certain things you can only do when you have people in a room trying to whiteboard ideas or whatever virtually. For me is really, really hard.
Yeah. I think socializing of ideas is the super, super important.
Yeah.
You've got to check it out. And if, a good leader, when it comes time to vote, if there's going to be a vote, the last thing you want to do is get to the vote and there's going to be a no.
Yeah.
So that's
Nailed it.
You got to socialize and make it better before it gets to that point. So
you know what, Frank, one of the things that I noticed too, I don't know if you guys noticed when you're, I did 4 years virtually at my last institution, now in person. And one of the things that I've noticed is that we make mistakes in person that you can't see virtually. And it's the people interaction. It's the eye roll that somebody gave to somebody when they said something. You can eye roll yourself to death when you're off screen and nobody will ever see it. But when you did it in person with somebody, it was disrespectful. And that's a leadership moment. If you have an up and coming leader, and this is me just giving a random example, but there's those little moments, those coaching moments, those mentorship moments that it's hard to give them to somebody and it's hard to get them. And you wonder about some of the leaders, if they're not getting that all the time, how else they are crafting their leadership style, because so much about leadership is failure. You failed to deliver somehow, and 5 years later, you're presented with a similar situation. You go, oh, I remember that one. I'm going to do it differently. I think that's one of the challenges. And David, are all your people there too, your whole leadership team?
Yep, they're all here. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that gives you a distinct advantage, especially as you start to market and communicate your programs differently. That is, it's interesting how we go from COVID and you appreciate all of the things that come with remote work. And then COVID goes away and you start going, man, I'd like to have people back in front of me. It is really, it's like you can't, what is it? You can't have what you want, or you want what you can't have sometimes. And the grass is
always get what you want.
That's right.
Get what you want. It's easier to give something than it is to take it away.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Well, we have some people, I mean, like every place, we have allowed some remote working. We have a policy around that. So we do, I mean, I think all of us have appreciated having the opportunity to do a little bit of remote work. And so that's been helpful. But we also realize there's just so much that happen. Things happen so much more efficiently in many cases by being together, because you can solve a problem by walking across the hallway and get your answer, rather than writing an email, then waiting for them to give you the email. And then, so.
Now, if they're in person down the hall from each other and they're writing each other emails, which still does happen.
I do too. Yeah.
Then you gotta figure that one out. Yeah. That happens. Yeah. Well, Frank, do you have any other questions for David before we close this out?
I just got one. And it kind of goes back to some of the things that you said. I mean, you talked about, should Christian Theological Seminary be reaching out to, let's say, the Catholic priest, or pick any denomination? How would you make your work ecumenical? And how? And I mean, when I think of the world that we live in, we've become so polarized in so many ways. Yikes! Or so many tribes, and in ways, when we look at different religions. It's just, is that a manifestation of some of the challenges we see in society? So is there an ability for you to help the world going forward by bridging some of these gaps and then bringing in my Catholic priest to sit with you and to learn from you and vice versa?
Yeah. Well, the good thing about a seminary like ours is that, we have probably 25 different denominations on campus. So we've got everybody. You name it, we probably have it. And one of the things that we pride ourselves in is inviting people to be together. And it doesn't always work well. I mean, not everybody always gets along. There's a lot of different theological opinions. And at the same time, the school has its own set of values. There are some things that we don't debate, even though there may be a denomination that would disagree with us. We don't debate women's ordination.
Yeah.
That's just not a debate. We don't debate whether gay people can be Christian. We don't debate that. That's not up for grabs. We don't debate whether African-American people and white people are both valuable and cherished by God. We don't debate. It's just like we don't debate those things.
Yeah, table stakes.
So, yeah. So, but even that said, we have a lot of different theological opinions, and people have to really figure out how to be together and just how to talk together. We don't expect everybody to agree on everything, but they have to learn how to be in community with each other. And I do think we make a contribution just by our existence, by the gathering and scattering. I tell my people, the New Testament is clear. The Christianity is clear that before a single word of the New Testament was written, Christians were gathering on the first day of the week for the breaking of the bread. Before the New Testament was ever written, people were gathering for communion and community on the first day of the week. That tells you how important gathering and scattering is, because it gave way to all of these reflections of Christian community that got manifest in the New Testament. So
100%.
We call that disruptive agreement, David. That's with my 100% button, one of my favorite buttons. But we like to end our episodes with the same two questions of every guest. By the way, you've done pretty well considering you didn't know you were going to record today. I have to tell you.
Well, thank you.
Number one, what did we not say or not talk about related to Christian Theological Seminary? Open mic for you. Get to say anything you want at all, anything that comes to your head. And number two, what do you see for the future of higher education?
Well, the one thing you didn't ask about, and I didn't talk about, but I will now, is our Faith in Action project. So if we think about the four kind of windows of CTS, the School of Counseling, the School of Theology, the Counseling Center, the fourth window into our community is the Faith in Action project, which is a project established about 7 years ago, designed to inspire individuals and communities of faith in the work of poverty mitigation. So this is to move Christianity beyond the limits of charity and into actually dismantling poverty and the mechanisms that really drive poverty. This is a big task. It's something that you can spend your whole life devoted to and not ever fix it completely. But we engage thousands of people every year in the region around through our Faith in Action project, congregations and pastors and lay people. We give grants away to small churches or to churches and other organizations who are doing direct service that we believe have got a track record and want to bring to scale their work. So we bring national speakers to our stage, Brian Stevenson, Michelle Alexander. We've had some really wonderful people in the past 7 years. So I think that's really important.
What do you see for the future of higher education?
The future of higher education, back to your earlier question, I think that those of us involved in higher education have to do a better job at making a case for why we're important. I think we have given up too easily. I think our arguments can often be more self-centered, self-serving rather than outward serving. That our educational offerings actually help the world to be a better place. And one of the things that I say regularly to my community, because we fall into what we call the progressive end of theological institutions, is that the values that we hold are dependent on a strong academic education. That you can't do what we want people to do unless they have a strong educational experience and a personal formation experience. If we wanted people just to repeat what their mother told them and what they heard in Sunday school, then they don't need a theological degree, or or if you just want to, counsel people in therapy based on what your parents told you, well, go right ahead. But I don't think you're going to do very well at it. You're going to cause more harm than good. It's not to say that what our parents taught us is wrong. It's just that it's limited and it hasn't been tested. And matter of fact, everything that we've been taught needs to be tested. We need to examine it, and that's what education is all about, so that we can develop our own perspective and point of view, and that we can make a contribution based out of our own work and our experience. So, one of the things I tell our theology teachers is that you've got to make a case about why it's important to do an academic study of the Bible. People think it's just, we just assume that it's important because we're a seminary. Well, of course you would study the Bible. Well, I want to hear you say why it's important. I want to hear you say why it's important to study church history. Why? Who cares about the past? Who cares what they did in the 15th century? That's what some of our students say when they arrive. Say, I don't want to study church history. That's ridiculous. I want to study bereavement. I said, well, you can study bereavement. You should do that. But it would be good for you to kind of know what the church has said about the nature of the soul and about what happens to us when we die. Wouldn't you want to know the history of that conversation? When somebody's on their deathbed and says, what's going to happen to me when I die? I would like you to be pastoral, but I would also love for you to have a theological education behind you. I think you'll find it more helpful than you realize. So I think we've got to do a better job. I think I know my disciplines. I don't know other disciplines, so I can't necessarily speak for all of higher ed, but I think it's probably the same. I think we have not done a good job of saying why we're important, why we matter. And we're just going to have to, we're going to have to get over ourselves and not be defensive and not whine and complain, but really do the hard work of making the case.
I want to thank you for saying that, because I agree 100,000,000%. In fact, I when we started the EdUp experience, the idea was we want to make education your business. That was the tagline. And we wanted to take a look within universities and pull back the curtain on who are these people running these institutions, because there wasn't a lot of visibility. And so now I feel like we have to fight back, like this open mic, as it were, for higher ed presidents and others to come on and say, we're not a bunch of folks sitting in an office chuckling about how we're making money and offering programs that don't matter. No, we're putting deep thought into these programs. We understand the challenges that the public are saying, affordability and accessibility. We get all of that. We're updating the business models. But we can't stand by and watch the uneducation of America here. What happens in 20 years if 85% of people don't go get a college education? It's a scary thought.
It is.
We're going to continue to bring the message of the positives of a higher education, and no matter what form. That's why we interview presidents from any type of institution, because every type is just as important as the next. Because we all serve a different type of student.
That's right.
And with that, I'm going to get off my soapbox and thank my guest co-host today. He's one of the most friendly people I know in higher education. I respect him a lot. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. He's the Chancellor of Purdue University Global. He's Dr. Frank Dooley. Frank, thanks for your being a first-time guest co-host today.
Joe, I mean, except for the faux pas at the beginning, I mean, I loved it. And David, it just, you're just down the road from me, so maybe someday we can find time for coffee and to explore more.
I would love that.
You
Yeah,
guys
I
are on
know.
the same email now, so
Yeah,
no
yeah.
excuses.
Yeah.
Here
Well,
live on the EdUp Experience podcast, we'll be following up with David and Frank on that coffee now, so they're forced to have it together. We'll figure out something. And of course, my guest today, your guest today, he's Dr. David Mellott. He's president of Christian Theological Seminary, and it has been an absolute blast and pleasure, honor to have you on, sir. Thank you for going in unprepared, but coming out looking like $1 million.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Joe. It was wonderful to be with you. And Frank, thank you. I loved it. Thank you for all the work that you're doing and the way in which you're supporting higher education.
Thank you, sir. With that, ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. Experience Element 451's Engage Summit Conference this June and get ready to unleash the power of AI in higher ed marketing. Deep dive into how this emerging tech will revolutionize the education landscape, from personalized student engagement to turbocharging your marketing efforts with AI. These sessions are guaranteed to help you smash your enrollment goals, connect with like-minded professionals, explore cutting-edge ed tech products and services, and leave with the knowledge to supercharge your institution's growth. Don't wait. Register now at engage.element451.com and seize your chance to lead the pack in the AI-driven education revolution. Use promo code EdUp50 for $50 off your registration. It's time to
Level up.
the beginning of a new era in higher education begins with you. Order your copy of Commencement, The Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education by Kate Colbert, Dr. Joe Salustio, with contributions by Elvin Freitas. It's higher education's must-read book of 2022. Discover how you can seize the moment to change higher education forever. Commencement, The Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education, now available on Amazon. For bulk orders, contact Kate, Joe, or Elvin.